Today, we're going to talk about sleep and why sleep is just as important as your diet. I know it's crazy, right? So every week, I talk to you guys about the standard American diet, and I talk to you guys about we have to get rid of the standard American diet, we have to eat the rainbow, and I'm probably going to talk about that again next week. Don't worry, in case you miss it. But it's just as important that we get our sleep right. So here's the thing. Even if you're walking around and your diet's on point and everything is wonderful, if you don't sleep enough, guess what? You're not going to have your health on point. So sleep is just as important as diet. The way food is medicine, I want you to start thinking of sleep as medicine. And just like we don't do our diets very well in America, it turns out we don't sleep very well in this country either. So 70 million Americans report difficulty with sleep. We have a sleep crisis on our hands. And sleep is really affecting and degrading our health, and it causes chronic diseases. And I'm going to talk all about that. So today, I'm going to scare you into sleeping. Why is sleep so important? Let's talk about it. So I'm going to tell you what sleep affects, and more specifically, what happens when we don't sleep enough. So the first thing is brain function. So brain function, let's talk about brain function. Even one night of sleep deprivation will affect your brain function. They did a study on people who are gambling to see what happens as they become sleep deprived. And it turns out the more sleep deprived you are, even in the course of one night, the riskier decisions that the gamblers made. So they were betting more and making more risky decisions with one night of sleep deprivation. Now, casino owners know this, which is why there's no windows around the casino so that you don't know if it's day or night and you don't notice the passage of time, because they know that if they keep you sleep deprived, you're going to make riskier and riskier decisions. Now imagine what that means in your life, that if you're sleep deprived, you're not going to make the sharpest decisions the next day. But while we're on the topic of brain function, I do want to tell you about the glymphatic system, which I put in here, fancy word, glymphatic system. But what it means is we have a draining system in our brain. And what it does is it's supposed to take all the waste from the day and kind of drain it out into our lymph system. That only happens when we sleep. So if we don't sleep well, we don't drain out the waste. And you already know what happens when you don't drain out the waste, right? Gunk builds up. And so the very next day, you're not going to be as sharp or as clear as you would have been if you were able to activate that system. And we've discovered that there's a link between the glymphatic system, that getting rid of the junk, and Alzheimer's. So again, if you watched my show last week about Alzheimer's, this point should scare you. Not getting enough sleep is linked to Alzheimer's. So not only brain function, not only decision making, but actually Alzheimer's. So pay attention to sleeping. The next thing that sleep does, it keeps your emotions in check. And you know what I mean by this. So do you ever have a night where you just didn't sleep well and then you show up to work like super cranky? I know I do. So one night and you're cranky. Now imagine what happens several nights in a row. You're just like chronic crankiness. So this is another big deal, right? If we don't sleep, we have chronic crankiness. And in reality, sleep deprivation has been linked to anxiety, depression, and mood disorders. And now you could see why, because that crankiness goes into overdrive and really starts to affect our mood. Moving along, sleep reduces chronic diseases. It affects everything. It affects your cardiovascular system, your heart, your blood vessels. All of them repair at night when you sleep. So if you don't sleep, you don't give them a chance to repair. So sleep deprivation is linked to heart disease, kidney disease, high blood pressure, and even a small reduction in your sleep has been linked to a hardening of the arteries and heart attacks. So sleep, I told you before, it's connected to Alzheimer's. It's connected to heart attacks. Okay? I'm hoping that your mind is blown because mine is as well. But it's also connected to immunity. When you sleep, your immune cells, your T cells, they kind of gather and they're at their highest level. So your immune system gets stronger and strengthened when you sleep. A few nights that are sleepless and your immune system is deprived. So you know if you had like a few days, you went on vacation or you stayed out a few nights in a row, and then that third and the fourth day you come down with a cold, That's not a coincidence. It's because you didn't let your immune system recover and recuperate at night with sleeping. So it affects immunity. And of course, it affects inflammation. And if you've been following me by now, which you should have, you know I'm all about talking about inflammation. And if this is your first live that you're listening to, I want you to go back and listen to my talk on inflammation. So chronic sleep deprivation is going to cause chronic inflammation, which you should know by now. As I said, if you don't, you should watch my shows. Inflammation leads to disease. So once again, we have lack of sleep connecting us to disease. And if I didn't convince you that you need to sleep because of your brain function, keeping your emotions in check, and chronic disease, this last point should convince you, which is it keeps your weight in check. So if you want to look cute in that bikini, you need to get your sleep. But all kidding aside, let me tell you why that is. There are some hormones in charge of hunger and fullness. So ghrelin is in charge of being hungry, and leptin is in charge of feeling full. Guess what happens when you don't sleep? You have more ghrelin, which means you're hungrier, you're snacking the next day, and you have less leptin, which means, try to say that fast, less leptin, which means that you don't get full. So the next day, not only are you cranky, but you're extra snacking. And sleep deprivation also affects your insulin and your glucose levels. So once again, can link you to diabetes. Lots of fun, this lack of sleep. All right, hopefully I convinced you by now that sleep is important. So the next question I usually get asked is, how many hours is enough? How do I know if I have enough? Generally speaking, the answer is 7 to 9 hours. Now, it's a range because it depends on what your day is like, what your job is like the next day, depends on your age, and also depends if you have any chronic issues. But 7 to 9 is a good goal to reach for. So try to get 7 to 9 hours. So hopefully, again, I convinced you that you need it. I told you how many hours you need. And now the question is, how do I improve my sleep? Great question. I'm going to tell you how. There's really 3 things that you have to do to improve your sleep. We have to talk about your sleep environment, your sleep hygiene, and what you consume. Let's start with sleep environment. I am killing it with these buttons today. I'm getting everyone. I love it. Sleep environment. The very first thing we have to talk about is the environment we sleep in, the room that we sleep in. First, it has to be dark. So if your neighbor really likes to keep the light up all night because whatever, security reasons, you need to get blackout shades. But also in your room, let's say you have, I don't know, like one of those air purifier machines and it has a little button with a light on it. That has to be covered. If you have an alarm clock and it emits a light, it has to be covered. You need that darkness. Why? Brain really knows it's day and night. It doesn't check the clock. We check the clock, we check the watch, but your brain doesn't do that. Your brain looks for cues. If it's light and sunny, it thinks it's daytime. If it's dark, it knows it's time to go to sleep. So if you have a bedroom with light in it, it gets confused. Is it nighttime? Is it daytime? It doesn't know, and it makes you restless in your sleep. So it needs to be dark. The second point is that it needs to be cool. I fought this point for a really long time because I like a warm bedroom, and my wife always said it should be cool, but she wins. Gina, you're right. Okay, so your room needs to be cool, not cold. It needs to be cool, and I like to tell you why. I always like to give you the science behind the why, because when you go to sleep, your body temperature goes down. So when it goes down, it's cool, it's not cold. And if you raise the temperature in the room, again, you're confusing the body. Is it time to get up? We're trying to calm down. Systems get cool. So you need a nice, cool room. And I lost that battle. And of course, you need quiet. It needs to be quiet. That's a pretty obvious one. If you're hearing things, you're not going to fall asleep. If the environment that you live in is not quiet, consider getting earplugs. And one of the tools that I really love is something called a white noise maker. So you get it for like $30 on Amazon, and it just creates this ambient background white noise that will really kind of block out any sounds that you have in the house. Because I have a teenage son, he comes home way past my bedtime. So that white noise maker keeps me in check and keeps it quiet for me. So sleep environment. The next thing we're talking about is sleep hygiene. And what we mean by sleep hygiene is the routine and the habits that we have before we go to sleep. Now, any parent knows this, that if you have a kid that you're trying to get to bed and somebody comes over and starts to playing and tickling them and making them laugh and jump on the couch, they're not going to sleep. Why? Because they're not habits that get them calm. They're habits that get them riled up. It's the same thing for us. We have to have habits that tell our brain it's time to sleep. And we have to start that around 30 to 60 minutes before it's time to sleep. So we need a consistent sleep schedule. Again, we know that for our kids. Don't forget to apply it to yourself. We need to have more or less the same time to go to sleep, more or less the same time to wake up, so that your body knows it's nighttime. And you need a relaxing bedtime routine, whatever that is for you. So if it's reading a book, if it's taking a warm shower, but it's not the time for a high intensity drama right before sleep or for really intense news. People who watch the news at night really have a hard time falling asleep. It gets them riled up. So it's not a good time for that. Of course, I'm going to talk to you about electronics. I'm sorry, but it's back to that light thing. When we have a screen and that screen emits a light, that light is telling our brain that it's daytime. You're trying to go to sleep, you're relaxing, you put that blue light in front of your face. Guess what? Your brain is thinking it's time to wake up. So it is very sleep disruptive. And of course, the apps themselves are also sleep disruptive because they're designed to get you involved. So maybe something makes you laugh, maybe something makes you say, oh, and maybe something gets you irritated. Either way, these are emotions that keep you up. So that's not something that we want. And the notifications, the buzzing, the lights that go off from our phone, they are disruptive to our sleep. So we need to let go of the electronics at bedtime. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. Which brings me to the next point, which is what you consume. What you eat during the day, it will affect you at night. People forget this all the time. They're like, I don't understand. It's 9 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock, whatever your bedtime is, and I just can't fall asleep. But they forgot that they had 4 shots of espresso at 3 o'clock. What we do in the day affects our night. So if sleep is a priority for you, I need you to start thinking about it from lunchtime. What am I doing from lunchtime on that's going to affect my sleep later? So caffeine intake, right? As I mentioned, you're having those 4 shots of espresso at 2 p.m. because you need to get through, your afternoon dragging. By the way, the reason you're dragging is adrenal fatigue, and you should check out my video on adrenal fatigue. But nonetheless, if you have that espresso shot, it will still stay in your system up to 12 hours and can really affect your sleep. So caffeine after 12, if you have difficulty sleeping, let me say that again. If you have difficulty sleeping, you should not be having caffeine after 12. And while we're on the topic of stimulants, not just caffeine, but sugars, chocolate, and certain medications. If you're taking a decongestant, because it's allergy season, guess what? That will affect you at night also. So don't have that. Next is your last meal before bed. So your last meal before bed is going to affect your sleep intensely. If you have a large meal at the end of the day and then you expect to fall asleep, it's not going to happen because your digestive system is trying to slow down, is trying to calm. When we sleep, the digestive system slows down because we don't need to digest when we sleep. But now you just gave it a big project. You gave it a big meal that it has to digest. So it takes longer to digest and it makes it more difficult to fall asleep. And if your last meal is, I don't know, high carb, a bowl of pasta, a glass of wine, which is a typical meal for a lot of people, all of that, as it gets digested, breaks down into sugar and wakes you up at night. So that last meal is going to affect your entire sleep. So think about it. Your last meal should be about 3 to 4 hours before you go to sleep. And if you're hungry before bedtime, have a light snack, something that your body doesn't need to work hard at digesting. Your fluid intake, this is an easy one. You shouldn't drink a lot before bedtime. Okay. So if you watch my video on water and you're like, oh man, I really need to get my water in, don't do it at 8 p.m. 8 p.m. is not the time to get hydrated for the day. It's not the time to catch up on your drinking for the day because pretty obvious. I don't need to give you science about it. You're going to be in the bathroom all night. So watch your fluid intake in the afternoon and in the evening. And of course, I mentioned this earlier, alcohol. Alcohol makes you feel sleepy. You might say, if I have a drink, I'm able to fall asleep. That's true. But again, it breaks down into sugar all night and will wake you up. You'll be tossing and turning. You might have heart palpitations. Alcohol and sleep, they don't mix. make you fall asleep, but it doesn't help you stay asleep. So now my favorite sentence is, let's recap. And if you don't by now that I'm a GIF, you should look it up. Go on your GIF on your iPhone and type in the word recap, and you'll see me do this. So let's recap. Sleep is as important as diet. If you're out there eating your gluten-free ice and sleeping 2 hours a night, it's not going to work, sis. By the way, gluten-free ice, I sell it on my website. No, I don't. I'm just kidding. But if you're thinking your diet's on point, you're eating gluten-free everything, no dairy, and you're not sleeping enough, you're not going to get to the goals that you want to. You're not going to meet your health goals, okay? So you need to sleep. Sleep is as important as diet. You got it down during the day, you're figuring out your diet, you're eating your food, but you have to work on that second half of that 24-hour cycle, right? That sleeping portion. You have to get it. You have to get it right. So sleep is important. It affects your brain, your mood, your body, your weight. It affects everything. So you have to get it. You just have to get on point. And the way we do that is your sleep environment, right? Cool, dark, quiet. Your sleep hygiene, which is your habits before you go to sleep. And of course, your food and your liquid intake before bedtime.